Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
My thanks to Deputies MacDonald and O'Brien for bringing this bill to the House, and the Labour Party will be supporting it. We opposed the Water Services Act when it was introduced in 2017. And to quote my former party colleague Jan O'Sullivan, it is a complete fudge between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. It's incredible to me, really, that we're still talking about water charges in 2025. They were put on the table in 2010 by Fianna Fáil in their agreement with the Troika after they bulldozed the economy, and the issue was then taken up by Fine Gael, and the book was passed to my own party. And I'm not going to try to absolve us of our role in that matter. We've obviously been on a journey with water charges, and we've paid a price for it, both politically and on a personal level with some of our public reps. We took a position, we made an argument, and we lost that argument, and we accept that. As far as we're concerned, it is a settled issue. It does appear, though, and despite what the Minister says, it does appear that there are whisperings that it isn't a settled position for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and it's understandable why recent reports that Ciarán Ahern would be introducing excess use charges would raise alarm bells with people. It is an emotive issue for so many people, as we in the Labour Party know all too well. And as environment spokesperson for the Labour Party, I am of course sympathetic to the argument that we need to curb excess water usage, or the amount of water that goes to waste. So water is obviously a precious and finite resource, and from an environmental and climate change perspective, it's important that we protect our water and our water supply. As climate change progresses and accelerates, it will become an increasingly scarce resource, so we cannot treat it like some abundant commodity. Under the plan published by Ciarán Ahern, every household in Ireland would have a 213-litre allowance and a 213,000 litre allowance, and any usage above that, subject to certain exceptions, would face a charge. The average household use is 125,000 litres, so around 40% below that limit. But I find it difficult to believe, based on the figures, that excess use among households is such a widespread issue that domestic charges would ever need to be introduced anyway. Obviously, there will be some who are wasteful with water, but by and large, I think people are generally conscious of how much they use and do their best to keep their usage to around what they actually need. This can't possibly be a revenue-raising measure either. I would imagine the amount that would be raised would be little more than minuscule anyway, and it would be far, far short of what is actually required in terms of investment in our water infrastructure and our networks and our pipes. So obviously, if this does come to pass, it would be a punitive measure designed to curb excess water use, which again, I'm sympathetic to as a goal, but I think if we're looking at it seriously, at conserving water and protecting our supply, the finger is being pointed possibly in the wrong direction. An average water use that's 40% below the threshold where these charges would ever potentially kick in tells me that domestic use isn't really the issue. Instead, we should be, if we are going to levy water charges, we should be levying them where we know that there is a massive level of consumption. I'm already on the record regarding my opposition to this government greenlighting more data centres due to their enormous consumption of energy, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions they produce, and the pressure they're putting on our energy grid. But we also need to talk about the huge amount of water it takes to run them as well. And I'm conscious that, like all non-domestic users, data centres are required to pay for the water they use. Given the sheer scale of that usage, though, and the runoff effects in terms of wastewater generated and the increasing pressure on the system by growing demand in this area, I do think that there's scope for potential additional levies to be imposed. If we take the wastewater data centres generate, for example, of the water consumed globally by Microsoft data centres in 2021, 41% of that water went to waste. Granted, it could be returned to treatment facilities, but as far as I'm aware, there's no cost associated with that wastewater applied to that wastewater and the additional pressure it adds to the water treatment facilities. The upshot of that additional pressure is that in cases where the treatment plants don't have sufficient capacity, untreated or partially treated water is released into local water bodies. It's a similar case for Google, where around 27% of the water taken in by their data centres globally was discharged as effluent. In their 2024 environmental impact report, Google stated that their Dublin data centre withdrew 2.7 million litres of water, and in Google data centres globally, their water use increased by 17% on the previous year. They have stated publicly that the expansion of AI will lead to more demand for data centres, and therefore more demand for water. We're all aware of the growing demand for energy in data centres as well, of course. There are two salient points here. The first is that all of our climate action plans have been quite clear in the potential threat posed to our water supply and water quality. CAP 21 is perhaps most explicit, stating that climate change will likely result in increased water demand as a result of the increased frequency of heat waves, leading to further strain on water transmission and distribution networks, as well as on supply. The second point is that Ciarán Ahern's National Water Resources Plan notes that nearly 60% of our water resource zones are in deficit and cannot provide reliability to customers in normal circumstances. That number increases to 67% of water resource zones in winter conditions and 79% in drought conditions. So what I'm trying to get at here is that data centres are taking huge amounts of water out of a system that is not only facing serious threats as a result of climate change, but is also struggling currently to provide sufficient reliability. It is in that context that we need to be looking at some sort of additional levy on the high consumers, or a kind of a polluter pays principle that goes beyond being some punitive measure on ordinary people and actually contributes to further investment in our network of pipes, investment that is desperately needed. The small number of household consumers who do use excess amounts of water surely pales in comparison to data centres or other high-consuming commercial enterprises like large-scale industrial farming or pharma. Fundamentally, though, in terms of addressing wastewater and improving water conservation, we need to sort out our pipe network. It is a genuine outrage that nearly 40% of our water is lost through leakages before it ever reaches a tap. I accept that some progress has been made in recent years on bringing that number down, but there are complicating factors. But really, that progress has been quite slow. We need to ramp up investment and the delivery of an improved water infrastructure network with far greater urgency. Perhaps that additional levy on high-consuming commercial enterprises, as I've suggested, might form part of the funding model. I'll conclude by returning to the main crux of this motion. A large part of the concern around the introduction of water charges was that it would lead to the privatisation of water services. That was never our intention in the Labour Party when we held the relevant brief, but the public concern is there and we acknowledge that. The obvious solution to putting these concerns to bed, putting this issue to bed, is to hold a referendum to enshrine our water resources and infrastructure in public ownership. Indeed, in 2016, the Labour Party brought a bill to the Dáil to give effect to that, as well as ensuring our gas and electricity transmission and distribution networks remain in public ownership. That remains our position. I would urge the government to seriously consider such a referendum. It may well be the case that the government has no intention of introducing water charges, we welcome that, or to privatise our water resources and infrastructure, as we've heard. But there is sufficient doubt and scepticism about that out there, Minister. As I've said, introducing domestic water charges is pointing the finger in the wrong direction. The elephant in the room is that data centres and other large commercial businesses that put serious pressure on our water security. That's where we need to be looking if we are ever going to be applying anything like a polluter pays principle.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.